Everybody got quiet. That's my cue. All right, well, thanks everyone for coming to SEM.js tonight. I'm Ian. We're going to have something a little bit new tonight that we haven't done exactly this way before. You'll notice there was no pizza in the back just yet. About halfway through, we're going to take a little break between our two speakers. I don't know if it'll be pizza, but there will be food in the back in between. And then we'll take 10 or 15 minutes and then get back to our second talk for the night. So we'll see how it goes. Let me know afterwards if it works out well or not. The Wi-Fi username and password is down here at the bottom if you haven't seen that. It's Duo Guest and Cats for Fun, because of course they are. So these are the ones of us who kind of help put together SEM.js. It takes quite a few people to make this happen. And several of us are here today. Maybe if you are an organizer, can you raise your hand? There's Ryan in the back. He's the one to talk to if you want to speak. And we've got John doing AV. And you help out with the study group, don't you?
Yeah, I'm Mohammed.
Awesome. Yeah, I haven't actually met you, so thanks for coming. I'll talk to you later. Yeah, so if you're interested in getting in touch with us, hit up any one of us or drop us a line at hello@semjs.org. So we want this to be a safe and inviting space where all different kinds of people can come and talk about JavaScript and anything else. So we have a code of conduct. Basically just says treat everyone with respect, no harassment. This is the sort of the beginning of it. Hit up coc.semjs.org for the full details. Oh, this is wrong. Okay, the slides don't seem to be updated. Yeah, this is not Barracuda. This, give me 1 second. Sorry about that. All right, let me change my share. All right. That looks better. Yeah, so I wasn't sure whether to call this Duo or Cisco, but this is that. They were acquired recently, and all the signs still say Duo, so I guess we'll call it that. Do you want to come up and say a little bit about Duo, and maybe you can set me straight on who you are and what you do?
Internally, we call ourselves ISCO.
Nice.
But no, we are Duo. As you might have heard, we got acquired recently for chunk of change, which is pretty cool. We are constantly looking for front-end developers. About the company, if you don't really know too much about us, our mission is to secure users across applications, across networks, and provide an easy way to do so. I'm a JavaScript developer. I've been here 3 years. We do a lot of cool shit with stuff like TypeScript, Redux, and React, and all the cool toys that you can imagine. If you are interested in hearing more about Duo, just want to chat, I'll be here for a little while after, and would love to speak to some of you. We're constantly looking for developers like you. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for giving us a place to meet. AV today, we've got John Chapman from Symphono. They've provided a lot of equipment in John's time. He's back in the back. We're testing out a live stream right now on YouTube. If this works out well, then we're going to try to do that going forward. It'll also give us a nice way to have a recording ready to go at the very end that we can send out and you can share. Food today is coming from Alpha Django. They'll be here a little later to... Oh, do you want to come up and talk now then? All right, cool.
Thank you very much. It's my first time here, so it's good to see some people, some new faces and stuff. I'm from Alpha Django. Alpha Django is a company that builds startups. We've been building startups, greenfield startups for about 10 years now. Currently, we have 2 developers, 3 developers, and we work on small projects. Our developers actually run the projects. We like to have a one-to-one correspondence with our clients and the developers. I think that's it. If you have any questions, we're always looking for good Ruby on Rails developers and good clients who are or friends or family or anyone else that's looking to build a new startup.
At the end of the first talk, I am going to ask the speaker to ask a question of all of you. Whoever raises their hands and gets the question right will get a one-year membership to any JetBrains product, a one-year license. After the second one, we'll do the same thing, but it'll be for a SemJS t-shirt like I'm wearing. If you are interested in sponsoring us, the email to hit us up at is sponsors@semjs.org. Cool, so we have our meetings the second Monday of every month at 6 p.m. The location changes, so check out the meetup.com event notice to find out where to go. But you can mark off your calendars for the second Monday of every month. Our next meetup will be December 10th for an introduction to WebAssembly. I'm really excited about that talk. I think it's going to be great. If you have ideas of talks you want to give, send us a note at speakers@semjs.org. We're currently looking for March, so if you still got some time, no pressure. You can think through something, and we can get you on the schedule. So we also have a study group. It's a lot different from this meeting. It's much more informal. It's not structured in the way that this is, where I'm or a speaker is giving you information. It's very much more collaborative. You get together and sort of bring a project, come to mentor, come for help. It's a smaller group. It's always at Pillars, the Forge, downtown here. Normally, it's 2 weeks after our main meetup, but with Thanksgiving and Christmas and everything going on right now, they've combined it to be on December 3rd. Is that right, Mohammed? That's what the meetup notice said, so that's what I'm going with. But if you're interested in that, there's an email down there as well. Rochester Full Stack. We've got a couple of members here that are regulars that also run this. Looks like a really cool meetup coming up on Wednesday. Do you want to say anything about that, Spencer?
Yeah, thanks. My name is Spencer. I'm one of the co-organizers of RFS. Marco Maurice, running the camera there, also a co-organizer. This month, we normally meet on the second Tuesday of every month, so it's usually the day after SemJS. But this month, we had moved our meeting to Wednesday. And we're going to be having a presentation on non-alphanumeric JavaScript. If you guys are familiar with this, this is JavaScript that gets evaluated using things like square brackets, parentheses, addition signs, and exclamation points and whatnot. So if you're interested in all where that came from and how it's used, hit us up. You can find us on meetup.com. Just look up Rochester Full Stack. Thanks. Cool.
Is there anything else that I missed that anyone knows about that's coming up that you think this group would like to know about? Yeah.
The Google Chrome Developer Summit is currently running today and tomorrow. Live streaming, or you can get the recorded sessions afterwards.
Okay, great. Anything else? All right. So one of the reasons we have sponsors is because companies are looking to hire people like you. I like to show this chart here. It's from last year's Stack Overflow developer survey. It sort of shows that at the bottom here, these are people who are completely satisfied with their jobs. But there's a lot of people kind of in the middle or at the lower end who aren't happy with their jobs. And if you're one of those, or if you're just looking for a change, hit us up at jobs@semjs.org up at the top. And we will put you in touch with any of our sponsors who seem interesting to you. We keep a list of our sponsors and kind of a little bit of a description about them. You'll email us. We'll say, hey, here's the people who are looking to hire, and then put you in touch and make introductions. And that's how I got my job at my current position right now. So it does work. So send us an email. After the meeting, we like to get together and chat, get to know each other. One of the great things about this meetup is just meeting other like-minded or similarly interested people. We're going to try a new location this time. It's the Cirque Bar, just 1 or 2 blocks down the road. Just opened up recently, so we'll try that out. And for our talks, like I said, we've got 2 today. The first one's going to be from Jason Gretz, Sensational Slides with Markdown and JSX. Then we're going to have a little break for food, and then we'll come back and learn more about the Vue.js developer experience. So, Jason, if you want to come up here, give him a round of applause. And now comes the awkward transition phase where I hand off the microphone and I stop sharing on the screen. You get to look at yourselves for a second. And I'll let you share to the Zoom. And it'll come up
Mm. All right, cool. So I'm going to be talking about MDX Deck. So first, before I introduce myself, I want to go over a quick agenda. I'm going to introduce who I am, go through a preface of what this talk is about and what it's not going to cover, what MDX is, what MDX Deck is, then some basic use cases. We'll go over a quick pro-con analysis based on perhaps what you've used with some other slide decks, and then we'll give an interactive demo where we're going to be spending most of our time. So again, I'm Jason Gretz. During business hours, I work as a lead front-end developer at Domino's Pizza up at Domino's Farms. I'm currently leading several small development teams. We're rebuilding our in-store systems, so it's a long-term project and a lot of work, so we're also looking for people all the time if you're interested. In my personal life, I love staying up to date with front-end technology and technology in general, so I'm always out there reading white papers, staying up to date with TC39. That doesn't mean I'm in the weeds constantly, but I'm aware of what's going on, and when I need to use something, I start digging into it more. Love playing Ultimate Frisbee. That's sort of ending now with the weather, but we just had a tournament this last weekend, not this past weekend, but the weekend before that, where we all dressed up in Halloween costumes and played Ultimate all day. So it was a really good time. I do dabble in video games here and there every now and then. Probably this winter will be a time where I pick that up again since we got some time. I live with my loving wife. We have a dog and potentially kids in the future. So what this talk is not about. So I'm not going to cover how to speak in public or how to structure or design the perfect slide or how to engage your audience by coming up here and using gestures. That's for another time, another presentation. What this talk is about is how to use a tool to create effective slide decks for the technical professional, people like you and me. So the tool is MDX Deck, but what's MDX? So simply put, it's Markdown with JSX. And what you get with that is power, because Markdown is already super simplified, but a lot of the problems people have with it is it's so simplified that they want to start pulling in HTML and CSS to modify how their application or how their website is displayed. And you're going to get that with MDX because it's now not only pulling in HTML and CSS, but it's pulling in a library to render JSX into your page. It's customizable, and what I mean by that is not only can you style your web page, but you can assign components directly to HTML tags. It's Markdown based, as I already mentioned, which makes this super simple and also incredibly fast. So they also have a specification out there if you're curious. It's linked into the notes at the end of this presentation. This is an example of basically it's a component I made, but what I'm showing here is that I'm assigning this to an H6 tag, and that's going to be in my list of components that I've styled. And if I go to the next slide, it's going to be a very ugly flashing heading, but you can see that it's just to demo that you can actually use components and you can use styles however you want because it's just JSX. So what's MDXDeck? Just MDX. But MDXDeck comes with a few built-in tools for creating presentation slides. So here's some basic use. I'm not going to go too deep into this because most of us know what Markdown is, but if you define your headings in Markdown, define your bulleted lists, or anything else that's in Markdown, it's going to render how you have your system styled or your application styled. The same goes with JSX. In this case, it's pretty much just HTML, but if you have your heading tags, you have your list, your bullet lists, unordered list, anything else, it's going to be styled just as you would expect it to. So what comes baked in? Well, you're able to create presentation slides, and that's what I'm actually using today for this presentation. Is I'm writing this in MDX, and I'm using MDXDeck. You're able to import and use React components, create customized themes and components, just pulling them in like you would any JavaScript import. Zero configuration CLI, this is awesome. Whenever I pull in a new project, I look for a zero configuration CLI because if I have to do a whole bunch of prep work before I start using the tool, I might not even use it. But with MDXDeck, I can just start it up and get going. There's presenter modes and there's speaker notes, which I'll get to later on in the demo. So some pro cons, like I said, built on Markdown, built on JSX. These are two things that most of us are familiar with. If not, Markdown is super simple, and JSX is very similar to HTML that we'll be able to pick it up like that. Responsivity with your slides is also super important. You get interactive demos because you can bake in JSX into your slides. You can actually have your demos embedded into your slide decks, which is very cool. You might have seen that happen with other presentation slides like at ReactConf or maybe what they're doing at the Chrome Developer Summit today. Runs locally or in the cloud, so if my computer were all of a sudden to crash, that's okay because I can link it up to the cloud and have it running there. You can publish and share with any VSC or VCS. So if I was working on a presentation deck with a team, we could be sharing and collaborating at the same time. Additionally, it's going to show you that history so that if you want to go back and see what changes have been made, you can do that. Export to different formats, and that's something that you kind of get with every single presentation deck, so it's important that it comes with this as well. And it's open source, so the limit is basically what you can create. Some downsides are it's new. It hasn't been out there for 20 years, so there are going to be limitations to it. It's going to be challenging for those who are not developers. There's no GUI for this, so you have to be writing code, and that's one of the pros to me about it, but it might be a downside for other people because drag and drop is also very simple. So now we're going to get into the interactive demo. I'm also going to grab a drink of water right now. Get rid of that cotton mouth. Okay, so with this demo, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to have the demo on one side, and I'm going to have my code base on the other side. So I'm going to be writing code, and it's going to hot reload and show that in the browser. So hopefully I'm zoomed in far enough. All right, can you all see that? All right. So, yeah. Okay. So, like I said, the install process is very simple. It's just an npm init, and you can get going as long as you npm install MDXDeck, but they also have an initializer, and if you're unfamiliar what an initializer will do for you, it's basically a script that'll kick open MDX for you and generate that script file for you. So if I go, let me see here. you can basically run something. Let's see if it'll zoom in here. Yeah. So instead of doing npm init my deck, what you can do is say, hey, npm init use deck, and that's the initializer, and it's going to reach out there, grab that script, and run it, so it'll initialize your deck immediately for you. Now, I'm not going to run that right now because it'll take a few minutes, and I don't want to waste your time. Now, here we have our slides. Now, one thing you might notice is this is in a demo.mdx file. When you start your project, you can contain all your slides in a single file. And that's really nice because you wouldn't want to have to create a new slide with limited amount of information, such as this install here, on a whole new JavaScript module and then have to import it. So you can pull in everything into one file. You can also separate it out if you want. If you have multiple files and it's a large slide deck, that's fine. You can do that. I can show you that later. But to create multiple slides, what MDX requires is 3 dashes, and that's what's here. So if I have multiple slides right here, so I can see that. If I go to the next slide, you'll see that it's something different, but I can duplicate that a few times, save it, and it's going to render, and then I have multiple slides. Simple as that. You'll also notice that this is very similar to the horizontal rule tag, so don't get confused with that, but you can also still use it because it's only 4 dashes. So if I save that, it's going to apply that horizontal rule there, just like you would expect it to. Using Markdown. Now, I'm not going to sit here and write out a bunch of Markdown in JSX and show you how to do everything step by step. So I copied a bit of this because I think most of us know how to write Markdown. So I'll copy this, I'll post it or paste it into my slide and save it. And what it's going to do is it's going to render that exactly how we'd expect it to based on the styling system that we have applied. Same goes with JSX. So I have this here. If I want to add that to my slide, it's going to load up in there and render everything as we'd expect it to. So using built-in components, I'm going to go over one of the built-in components called Appear. And what that's going to do is use a function as a child component, or you might be familiar with render props, and it's going to render each first child as animated in. So it'll render the first one, the second one, and then the third one, or however many that we have in there. So if we paste that in there, we save it, we can see, okay, the first one loads, the second one loads, and the third one loads, just as we'd expect it to. I also have this link in here, and I'll go over these notes in just a moment. But if we wanted to go to this link, I've included a lot of links in my presentation, so if you're curious, I'm going to push this out to GitHub, and it's available for you guys, and you guys can click on these links and go and view part of where I've got the information for this slide. So in this case, this is some built-in components such as head, image. Appear is the one that I just used. Notes I'm going to go over in a second. So the notes code block. So you might have noticed all this junk in slightly yellow on that screen. It's yellow on my screen. But essentially what that is it's a code block specific to MDXTech for presenter notes, for my own notes. Now, I can't really have presenter notes and show a slide deck that's different from them because I'm sharing my own screen, but I can jump into presenter mode, and it's going to show the notes that I have that I've included with the deck. So in this case, if I include the notes code block and I say, you know what, I need some notes for myself, let me add some in. I save that, it's going to show up here for me, which is super helpful. So I'll get out of that. There's also a notes component, and that's also very cool because what it's going to allow you to do, and I'll just copy and paste this in here, is it's going to allow you to render either Markdown or JSX directly into your notes. So you don't have to just look at this plain text file of notes. You can actually view how you want them styled. So if I copy paste that, let me. Fortunately, you can't exactly include note code blocks such as this with a notes component. It'll just use the last one that's included, so I have to get rid of some of these. All right, so I saved it. Nothing happened because I'm not in presenter mode. But if I jump into presenter mode, you're going to see that Markdown renders appropriately. I've got a bold Markdown text here, and I've got a bullet point list. Now, if I want to do that with JSX instead, I can also do that. So I'll save that. It's going to render my bullet point list for me. Now, creating custom components. This is where the fun begins. Custom components are pretty easy to do. It's just JSX or React components if you're familiar. But I have one in here that I brought in. I actually borrowed it from a couple people. I'm not sure where it originated, but I thought it was pretty cool. So something cooler than what I could create, I'll say that. I actually think that I'm importing that up there, but I have this day-night toggle component, and so if I save this, I guess I didn't import it. Let me do that. All right, so now I've got this custom component in here, and it's just a toggle, but it's pretty cool. Found it on CodePen, and then it led me over to Dribbble, where I was able to get the original image, I guess. So that's pretty cool. You can also add custom styles. So if we take this here, you can see that I'm now importing blinking text. This is that flashing header I showed you guys earlier. I have it surrounded in a div, just empty space here, and then I have an H1. Now the way we're going to add custom styles are, I guess in this case, these are inline styles. If I need to do something very specific and I need it right away, instead of creating some styles out in another file or in a CSS file, I can just write inline styles right here. So if I save this, you're going to see that I've got the dark slate gray background, I've got a padding, I've got my custom component in there, and I've got this toggle me with the view green color. Now, theming is, to me, like the heart and soul of MDXDeck. It's also was the most complicated part for me because they use styled components and something called styled system. Two things I'm unfamiliar with. I understand what styled components are. It's just CSS and JSX, but I haven't used it personally. I've used different ones over the years, and it was kind of annoying that they had that with the library and it was the way you had to use it. I guess you can use Emotion as well. They've got a tutorial on how to use that, but I ended up just creating my own CSS file and linking it in later. So, but if we wanted to use a built-in theme, they've got a few of them. If I link out here, they've got the basic default theme here. They've got this big one. They've got a couple others. I'm actually extending one of their themes called Future. And I'll show you how to add that in right now. So if I scroll up to the top, you can see that I'm pulling in all these different themes here. And that's so that I can kind of just show you how to use themes without having to code out all this import and export tags and remember what the themes are called. Right here, I'm using my own theme, And the way you'd include a theme with your deck, and mind you, this can only be you can only have one theme per deck file. So if you want to run multiple presentations, they can all use the same theme, but you can only use one theme per deck. So in this case, I'm using demo theme right now, but if I comment that out, I'm just going to destructure in a different theme. So if I use, let's say, code here, and I save that, it'll bring in their code theme and render it however it's styled. Now the important thing here is that you have to export that theme keyword as a named export. So, but you can use any theme that you want. So if we pull in hack, we have that here. And they're kind of cool, but you can also customize your own, and that's what I've done here. If we want to extend one of the built-in themes, that's something you can also do. That's what I did. I just wanted to use some similar theming from another theme called Future and then add my own styles to it. So what I've done here is if I pull this up, go back up to the top here. All we have to do is destructure one of the themes. Now they recommend destructuring the base theme if you're going to customize something because it uses styled components and it uses styled system. It requires certain properties to be available in your theme. So that's one of the gotchas that you might run into when creating customized themes. So they always recommend extending the base theme, and even for these nested properties such as colors, extend the base theme's colors as well. So if we do that, you get your new kind of cool styles. It's actually pretty ugly, but that's how you would be able to customize a theme if you want to extend one. So if you want to customize a theme like the one I have, let's see. All you'd have to do is name it in another. You could directly create it right here and just export that named export. That's totally fine. I was messing around a lot, so I created this demo theme here. And if I open that up, we can look at it and see what I've done. So I have here, I also included some notes in here because I was trying to learn theming as I went through this as well. But I have my headings. This is just an object literal full of properties. And then in my theme, I extend future by destructuring it, and I add in my own custom styles. Now down here is Prism. That's going to be used for styling your markup. So if you noticed in those code, or I guess in Markdown, you have code blocks, right? And you can say, hey, I want this to be a JavaScript code block, or I want this to be a Markdown code block. Well, Prism is what renders that in MDXStack. It's actually used in a lot of different libraries as well. Pretty popular. Now, if you want to just add some standard CSS, you would do that through this CSS property, and that's what I found to be the most easiest because I don't know styled components, I don't know styled system, and I don't really care to learn that right now. So, but if you want to, there's some links up here, and there's some more in the README file. Adding a built-in layout. If we scroll down. So I've got this content here, and that's simply to show that things are changing and what things look like as they're rendered to the page. But this is from Bacon Ipsum. If you're not familiar with it, it's a play on lorem ipsum, and it's just using meat for the words. But if you want to pull in one of their layouts, they have a few built-in ones, and you can also create your own. I'll show that in a moment. But if we go to this link, you can see some of the built-in layouts. They got one that's inverted, they've got one that's called split, and it tells you what those do. And I'll actually show those two right now. So if you wanted to, you could import this custom layout. And then the way you use it is by first, of course, importing it, and then you just need to export that directly within your slide, and that'll be your default export, and that'll override the styles that you currently have applied. So I think I'm actually bringing in these up at the top, so yes, I am. So if I save that, now I've inverted the colors on part of my layout. If I want to change that to split to see what that does, all I have to do is export it as the default, and it's going to show you what that does. Now, I know from looking at the documentation that what split does is it takes your first child component, shoves it to the left, takes all your other children, and shoves it to the right. If we want to create a custom layout, that's as easy as creating our custom theme. So I have a custom layout here called demo layout. So I'll pull that up here. I must have already included up at the top as an import. See. Okay, so there we go. So export demo layout. If I jump into that to see what it looks like, I can see that I have a div tag, and this also, again, is a function as a child component, or what people commonly refer to as a render prop. So it's going to add styling however you want it to. You can add your styles up here or import them from somewhere else. I'm just doing inline styles here. And then it's going to take the children JSX, and it's just going to put it in between those style tags. And that, to me, is how, if you want to get some customized theming for different slides or individual slides, this is how you would do that. So we've already gone over adding notes, so I don't think I need to go over that again. Presentation modes. So there's a few different presentation modes. One you've already seen before. If I hit Alt-P or Option-P on a Mac, you're going to see that now I can go into speaker mode and view my notes. There's also an overview mode, which is nice. It gives you this sidebar over here, and I can click on whatever slide I want. So if I go there, cool. Now I can hit Alt-O again, and it'll bring me back to my slide deck. The last option is Alt-G, which is grid view, they call it. And it gives you something similar to overview mode, but it puts it in a grid for you. And then you can scroll down here and select the slide that you were on. Handy little feature. CLI options. Now, if you noticed, I'm running two decks at once, and that's because the CLI options give me the option to run different decks on different ports. So I'm running one on the default port, and I'm running another on port 3101. Now there's also a couple different options here that you can read about in MDXDeck. I don't need to go over them here, but one of the options is to print out a screenshot of your first slide. You can also create HTML slides and basically printouts, and you can also export PDFs as well. And that will all be contained in the scripts of your package.json. So if we jump in there, you can see I have a start script, comment there, start 3100. I run Docker on my machine, and it takes up port 8080, which is the default starting port for MDXDeck. So I just run a lot of stuff on a different port, and I create a script for that as well. I have my demo script here. You have your build, and this is for things like continuous delivery and continuous deployment. So if you just need to build in, you don't need to actually start running the dev server. You can do that. Like I said before, you can create PDFs, screenshots, and then I have Prettier for my own formatting of my deck. plugins. Now, the only plugin that I found that was useful right now is CodeSurfer, and you're probably familiar with it. This is that highlighting, zooming in, and scrolling through code that you see a lot during other people's presentations, and it's very, very cool. So if I scroll down to CodeSurfer in my code, this is what it looks like. You pull in the CodeSurfer component. You have a couple different themes. I have 2 different themes here just because I wasn't sure how this would look on the slide. But then you have all these different properties. I've given it a title, the code. Now this is using raw loader, so you will have to include a Babel or a Webpack configuration, and then this is just going to extend the default MDX configuration just to include raw loader. And what that's going to do is it's going to use the file that you specify, in this case index.js, and it's just going to render it as text and then apply a theme over top of it. So in this case, I'm using Dracula theme. I'm saying that it's JavaScript here as a language, and I'm saying that I want to show line numbers. If I didn't want to show line numbers, well, that's easy. You just tell it not to by using the Boolean. But I like line numbers, so I'll include them. Then we have these steps. Now, the cool thing about CodeSurfer is that you can highlight lines, you can highlight a range, or you can use tokens. And I'll show you that right now. So let's go back one slide. Refresh that. So, I'm trying to get it to zoom for us. Okay, there we go. Okay. So if I want to highlight a single line, I can do that. And in my code, you can see that it's looking at line 1. And then I've included some notes down here. In this case, just zoom, it's car. You can highlight multiple lines at once, just doing the export line there. You can highlight a range. In this case, it's lines 3 through 5. Or you can do multiple ranges, but you have to if you want to do that, you have to use the lines tag. There isn't a ranges property for that. But you get the same thing with lines. It's just you have to write a little bit more code. You can show your whole component if you wanted to, and then you can use tokens. And tokens in this case are the words and the spaces are separate tokens. They don't have a good explanation of how they tokenize the code here, but in this case, you're going to see that export is 1 token, the space character is your 2nd token, const is a 3rd, space is a 4th, and then my strong up here on line 3 is my 5th. And you can specify that right here, where the line numbers will become the properties of the tokens object. So that's very cool. CodeSurfer's phenomenal. I love it, and it's very simple to use. I also have included some notes on here to get started with CodeSurfer if this isn't enough. Other than that, that's all I got. Any questions?
You're making these slides available?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to post this to my GitHub account. I created a nice little README for you guys because every tool has its struggles, right? And I think MDX Stack has those as well. And so I created this README for you guys, and I also included a how-to guide for theming for some of the caveats that I ran into. Now, if you already know styled components, you're probably fine with theming. I didn't, so it's kind of a struggle for me.
Do you guys use this at Domino's?
We do for presenting things. So we have basically our own concept of a front-end monthly where people will come up and present. I use MDX Stack. Other people use PowerPoint, but this is by far easier to me. If you think about your tooling, I'm not a fan of PowerPoint, nor am I a fan for paying for the tool just to give a quick presentation. If I'm able to use markup or Markdown to really quickly create my presentation slides, that's awesome. Generally, I'm also presenting about code, so being able to add in some components directly into my slides is very cool. Mm-hmm.
This is really cool. One of the kind of roadblocks for me with Markdown is that there's no built-in way to really include a child document. Is there something like that built in here, or is there a way to finagle it using an import?
Are you suggesting like an iframe?
Maybe, not necessarily though. I just mean anything where you can if I have a single slide that I might want to use in a number of decks, is there a way to just include that?
You would have to, I guess, you would have to add it to every single deck project that you have, but there's no reason you couldn't just import it that way. I suppose you could include it as a script tag and publish it, and then just pull it in like that as well. One of the things I have up here, just moving this slide down a little bit. So one of the components I didn't go over was this head component right here. And this is going to add in that head for my HTML. And this is where I specified my custom CSS. So if you wanted to, you can include your script tags there as well. I also added some favicons. So I don't see why not. Yes, thanks. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys.
Thought of a question to ask? All right, so he's going to ask a question. The way this works, the first person who I call on, so you have to raise your hand, don't shut it up, please. I will call on you and then answer it. If it's correct, come and give me your email afterwards.
This one I hope is not too difficult. I hit on it quite often. What are the two third-party libraries that MDXDeck brings in to style your components?
Emotion and style components?
Is that correct?
Incorrect.
Another try.
Have a point?
That's true. Anyone else?
Round it up.
All right, we'll give it to you. How about that?
Yeah.
What was the answer?
Styled system was the second one.
Styled system and styled components?
Yeah, I actually hadn't heard of styled system until I started using MDXDeck, and I was trying to figure out why nothing was working. So,
Cool. All right, well, thanks. Come give me your email address after this. There is food in the back, so if we want to take 10 minutes, we'll come back and start up the next talk at 7 o'clock. That's around 7 o'clock. All right, thanks. We need some music.
I know.
Yeah. It'll go in. You in? I mean, it doesn't show up on the screen. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Glad there was just enough pizza. Hope everyone got some. The next talk here, there's a lot of excitement about Vue.js. It's one of the fastest growing JavaScript frameworks, I think, that are out there. Brandon's going to talk a little bit about like what it is, compare it to a few other frameworks you may know about, and then go into more depth on the developer experience, what it's like to actually develop in Vue. So if we can all give Brandon a welcome. Hey guys. So, there we go. So, going to start with a bit about me. My name is Brandon Lyons. I'm a full stack developer over at MCity at the University of Michigan. I'm a big Vue fan. I picked it up as kind of the first framework I got into after jQuery, and then just ran with it from there. And I also like to make memes. So, yeah, that's about it. So I wanted to get into what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to briefly say, like, what is Vue and compare it to some of the other frameworks out there for anyone that hasn't used it at all. I'm going to talk about why the developer experience is important and why you should even care about this. We're going to go over 2 methods of creating a new Vue application, both from the CLI and the UI tool. And then we're going to talk about the Vue UI and go into a demo on that, and then the Vue DevTools and go into a little demo on that. So what is Vue? Vue likes to call itself the progressive framework. And that way they just mean like you can throw it on a script tag in an HTML page and run it that way. Or you can do, set up a whole project with Webpack, have the build system in place. It's very versatile. Unlike React, Vue is template-based by default. But you can use render functions and JSX if that's what you're comfortable with. I just talked about this. You can just include Vue from a CDN and use it in an existing web app. And Vue uses what's called the single file components pattern, which I'm going to show. And that is for everything of your component is all in one file. You have your script, or your template tag, then you have your script, and then you have your styles. So this is an example of a single file Vue component. This was just generated from Code Sandbox, their Vue template. So you can see here we have the template section of the file, which is just your markup. You have the script section here, which this one doesn't do much, it's just defining another component to include. And then your style section, where you just write regular CSS here, and it gets applied to the component that way. So I'm going to quickly compare Vue to some of the other frameworks out there. So in React, we have, both of these have pretty healthy communities behind them. There's a lot of tooling available. They're both growing very quickly. Like, they're pretty much the same in that regard. One of the big differences I found between the two when I was developing was having to use something like emotion or styled components in React, whereas with Vue, it's just, as I showed, it's just there. You just style tag it, and it's done. React and Vue are both multi-platform in the sense they can create progressive web apps, single-page applications, server-side rendered apps. And I don't have this on here, but you can even do desktop apps with Vue Electron. Compared to Angular, the creator of Vue, Evan You, actually worked with Angular before. So if you ever worked with Angular 1, some of the Vue directives might have a familiar feel to them. Vue and Angular both use templates. So you have your markup for your component somewhere. Angular, however, is more opinionated than both React and Vue. You kind of have to do things the Angular way.
And they also follow an MVC approach, like Model View Controller, which is it's different than most of like single page applications you would think about. So this is Vue compared to other frameworks. Let's get into some of the tooling and talk about why this is important. So why should I consider the tooling based around a framework? Web applications over time have been becoming like increasingly more complex. It used to be, you just had some HTML pages that would include a JavaScript file, and now you have like build systems, Webpack, you have linters, you have all these things running. Having one standardized tooling solution instead of like every team being able to be forced to come up with their own to solve these problems is really helpful, because obviously you don't have to write your own, and if it's in a standard way, everyone can be on the same page without people just getting confused and wondering like what you're doing when you throw up examples. And finally, like if a framework has good tooling around it, it shows that the core community and the core team of that framework, they actually care about the experience for the developer. So it's not just some library someone made where they don't care if anyone else uses it. It's actually something they care about, and you know that you'll be treated right. So now we're going to talk about creating a new application. There's two main methods here. The first one is using the Vue CLI, which this is a similar tool to something like Create React App or the Angular CLI, if you've used those. It's just a command line tool where you can quickly scaffold out a new Vue application. You can customize a lot of things while doing that. And then the Vue CLI is plugin based, which we'll get into that. I'll show examples of that. But pretty much that means you don't have to do everything all on the installation of the project. You can go back and add any features later through the plugin system. And the plugins are very powerful. They can hook into like the Vue service and change your Webpack configuration dynamically. So if you had to, say you had a plugin like a Sass plugin that you need Sass Loader or something for, the plugin itself will like hook into your Webpack config and just inject that in there every time you run or build the app. So you don't actually have to like manually change Webpack configs, which you still can, but you don't need that anymore, which is really cool. And then the other method for creating the applications is the Vue UI, and which is it's an extension of the CLI tool, and it's just an optional front-end web interface for it. You can do everything with the CLI that you can do with the UI, but the UI can just give you more information in a more presentable manner than just reading 20 lines spit out of a terminal. So this is an example of creating a project with the Vue CLI. This first screenshot here is showing when you run this command here, Vue create app name. It will ask you if you want to choose a preset of features or if you want to manually select them. And then the second screenshot here is an example of if I click this manually select here, these are all the features you can choose right off the bat to include in your project. So you see with one click, you can add TypeScript support, router support using Vue Router. Vuex is like the equivalent of Redux in React, just state management. You can add a linter. I usually use ESLint. And you can add testing right from here. So let's talk about the UI now. So CLI UI, that doesn't really make sense. It's command line interface, user interface. So yeah, that's probably a little confusing. It's included with the Vue CLI, so you don't have to install anything to get the UI. Once you have the regular CLI installed, it's there. It's a very powerful front end. So like I said, the UI can do everything the CLI does and vice versa, but the UI can obviously present that information in a more structured and, in my opinion, meaningful way. The UI is in beta right now. New features are launching very often. There's 1 or 2 main people working on this. So if you are using this, just be sure to update and stay up to date with that. And it is maintained by Guillaume Chow. I hope I didn't butcher his name. He is a member of the Vue core team that works on both the CLI and the UI. So you know you're getting like a first-party tooling experience here. It's not something hacked together. So let's get into some of the features of the UI. So like I said, it can do everything the Vue CLI does, plus some more. You can view project configurations and like config variables, and this will all be shown. So like you can view ESLint rules or any plugins you install right from there. There's support for widgets. This just came out this week, so it's really new, but you have like a project dashboard that you can put custom Vue components on that can do like anything. Like examples they had were launching a task or viewing news or killing a port right from this interface. And then you can view your tasks. So anything in your package.json file, any like npm run tasks are available here to run and analyze. So now I wanted to get into the demo for the UI. So we're gonna get out of here. And then what I'm gonna do is go through creating a project and just not actually create the project because it'll have to install everything. So go to create project here. Normally it would open right to the screen. I wanted to have it all ready beforehand. So I'm gonna go to my projects folder, create a new project. Let's call this test project Sem. It asked me to choose the package manager I want. I'm just going to use npm. And it'll initialize with a Git message, so we can type that in there. Is that good? All right. Yeah, so go to the next step here. So then this is asking me now what features I want to include in my project. So these this first option right here, you wouldn't have if you had a new install. This is what I use for all my projects, so I saved it as a template. So let's go through manual just to see what we have access to here. So again, this is the same thing that was on that PowerShell window earlier, but you have Babel, TypeScript support, progressive web app, router, Vuex store, CSS preprocessors. I'm just going to click some of these on. Unit testing, end-to-end testing, sure. This last one will break out, by default, the Vue CLI puts all your files, like your Babel RC and ESLint RC maybe, inside the package.json file. And this you can tell it to break it out into separate files instead. Let's go next here. So this page is taking all those features I selected earlier, and it's showing me all the configurations for them. So since I added the Vue router, it's asking me, do you want to use history mode for the router? Since I click CSS preprocessors, it's going to ask me which one I want to use, and it'll install that and set it up for you. So in this case, I'll do Sass, and like I said earlier, it will install the Sass package, change my Webpack config for me, and all that. Select my linter. I use ESLint and standard. And you can change these here. And then it'll ask me for my unit testing and end-to-end testing. So normally you'd do create project here, and this would run, do the npm install, all the setup. I'm not going to do that because we don't have the time. So I am just going to go back out of here to my projects. And we're going to go through a demo of the full UI now. So this is the dashboard page, and these are those widgets I mentioned. This is just a welcome widget, which these widgets are just Vue components. There's nothing special about them. And then this is, they added this one in here by default. It's the Vue News podcast. And what I thought was really cool is you could actually like listen to the podcast right from this widget inside your application. So as you're developing your Vue apps, you can keep up with everything new that's going on with Vue. And then, yeah, this one will kill a network port. And then if you do want to add or remove these, you just go to this Customize button up here. Remove it, click this. And to add them, you just click the plus sign down here. And then to show how easy this was, like, it took me about an hour and a half after I read the docs, and I wrote this little Hello World widget, which is just a Vue component, and it's really cool. Like the potential for these, I think, is going to be like insane. This came out like Tuesday, so people haven't gotten time to play with it yet. but you can do anything from here. So the next section we have is plugins. So from this section, you can add plugins to your project. So if I wanted to add a plugin, I would go here and click on Apollo. We want GraphQL. So I'm not going to install this because it would actually take time, but I would click the install button, the plugin would be set up, and then it would ask me which configuration files or steps it has, and I would set those. So that you can't remove plugins from here, and that's something I saw like people asking on the Vue forums. And the reason for that is because Vue has no way of knowing. It would be like the equivalent of once you eject in a React app. Vue has no way of knowing like what you changed outside of the default config. So to get around that limitation, it's recommended before you add a plugin, you just make a commit, and then if you do need to revert the plugin or uninstall it, you just revert that commit, and then the plugin's gone. So dependencies. This is pretty straightforward. You can add, instead of doing terminal, if you don't like typing npm install, you can install dependencies through here. So like Lodash, again, I won't add it, but you would install it here. You can tell it to go to main or dev. And then similarly, you can uninstall the dependencies right from here. Just click uninstall, and it'll run npm uninstall. So then we have this configuration section. This is where you can change, I said, like project config, and any plugins that are here will have a config page. So like I have the ESLint plugin installed, so that's why this is here. The Vue CLI options will be available for every project. So this here, you can set your base URL if your app is deployed at like a subdomain or a sub route or whatever. Output directory will change where Webpack outputs your built files. Similar with assets directory, that's Webpack related. The rest of these are just mainly performance options. You can turn on or off for depending on how you need to write your Vue application, if you need to support older browsers or don't want source maps on. So yeah, this is pretty straightforward here. But what I thought was really cool is I really don't like manually editing Webpack or ESLint config or anything, because I always mess up and it takes me like twice as long as it should. So here you can go view all your ESLint rules that are in your project, and then you can tell them, I don't want this one to error me, I just want it to warn me. Or just, I want this disabled altogether because I want to get around something. You can change these right from this GUI, which I think is awesome. And then it also has a link to open up your actual file if you want to edit it manually. Then finally here we have these tasks. So I'm going to run this one. This will just serve the application with hot reloading for development. But the cool thing is, now that this ran, we can see it populated all these statistics for us. So you see it tells us the size of our assets and dependencies, and it'll give us the loading times that the application will take on different internet types. So like 3G, 4G, cable modem. So this is really cool because I feel like a lot of us web developers, at least me, I take for granted that I am developing on like a really nice machine and I have a hardline internet. So you get a different experience sometimes when you view your app from a different device. And this will also tell you, it breaks down by asset and dependency what is taking up the most space and what is taking up the most loading time. So using this information, you can say like, okay, this dependency is really, really big. It's adding an extra half second to my loading time. Do I really need this plugin, or can I write something that will fulfill the same purpose with, less cost of performance? And then this has this output tab here will show you what command it ran to get this. So this task is just running Vue CLI service serve. It's nothing magic. It's just running npm commands. And this analyzer here is a little, I'm not sure what this chart is called, but it's a visual representation of your dependencies. You see node modules is pretty big. And yeah, you'll break down and tell you like everything in your project by size. And then the last thing I wanted to show in this view is this inspect. So what this will do is this will let me, I said Vue abstracts the Webpack config away from you. But this will let me view that Webpack config. So I wanted to see, like, say I wanted to merge something into the Webpack config, which this lets you do. I want to see what it looks like first so I know which things I have to target. Run this task. And then but this is the giant, let me go to the top here, like Webpack configuration file that Vue is using when it starts up your project. So you can see it has just the whole Webpack config here. So all those settings you could change earlier will change these. And you can also see, like, if you want to see what a plugin is doing, maybe you installed a plugin that changes your Webpack configuration and it's overwriting something you did. So you could do this and see that it took out your code or overwrote it or whatever. Yeah, so I think that's it for the UI. So I'm going to jump back to my slides here if it lets me. Oops. All right. So these were two screens I couldn't show because I didn't actually install the plugins, but I still wanted to, these aren't that good, are they? So this first one here on the left side is just, it's like a Git diff. So this plugin I installed was Apollo GraphQL, which had to add quite a few files to my project. It changed some of the structure. So it's going to let me view that, and I can commit changes down here to show exactly what happened. And like I said, if you have a commit before this and a commit after, you can revert that, and then the plugin is gone. And then this is the screen that comes up after you install a plugin. So like I said, plugins can have their own configuration options. So this one was for Vuetify, which is like a component styled library like Bootstrap or something. So this has options specific to that pop up after you install it. So you don't have to go in config files later and change those. You just do it in the process. All right. So this is all really neat. It's fancy web stuff using a lot of cool stuff, but is it actually useful? Where are you ever going to use this? So when I want to add a new library to one of my projects, my flow is usually I Google the name of the library, find their GitHub page, and then I'll search through there, find their docs, find their installation guide, and then after I install it, I usually have to go and set some files up, do some boilerplate code or whatever. So you're looking in a lot of places, and if you're anything like me, it's easy to get distracted on the internet and have like 20 tabs open. So it's not good for productivity. So what this can do is you go to one place for everything. It's a one-stop shop for all your packages, and it does that post configuration for you. The plugin maintainers or the community have to provide that, but like I showed that picture of the config, like that was coming from the plugin. So before that, to use Vuetify, you had to install it and then go like change all these files yourself. Now that they have a plugin, it does it for you. And the cool thing is, a lot of these that I saw, these plugins, they're not even written by the maintainers. Like the community just went, like someone wrote Apollo GraphQL Vue plugin, and it wasn't even like the team. So like you can depend on the community to write these tools that we'll all use, because it all gives back to everyone. And then, yeah, that's what I just pretty much just said, that package maintainers can write the setup wizards to run and handle that boilerplate for you. So that was the slide I had in here to break this up isn't there, but that was kind of the first part on the UI. The second part is on the developer tools, which is a browser extension available for both Chrome and Firefox. And they also have a standalone Electron app that I saw you can get working with like IE and older browsers or any other browsers. I have not done that myself, but there's lots of docs out there. And this allows the dev to easily track events. You can view your application state with your Vuex store. You can see and inspect your route changes. Every time a route change happens, you have a history of that. You can do time travel Vuex debugging. And again, Vuex is just a flow-based flow-based storage system like Redux. And you can manually edit the values in the Vuex store. And this doesn't seem like a big deal, but this just came out recently. And being able to manually edit it from the DevTools saves a lot of time. So the DevTools are broken up into 3 main tabs. I'm going to go over those real quick. The routing tab has two modes, history mode, which shows you every one of your route changes and the accompanying information there, your parameters. And you have a route map view, which shows you kind of just like a tree diagram of your application and every route that's available. The Vuex tab of the Vue DevTools will allow you to view your application store. You can directly change the application state from here, and you can see all your mutations that happen to the store and replay them using the time travel debugging, which is really cool. And the other tab is the Components tab. This is probably the most useful tab. It allows you to view every component in your application in like a nested tree structure. You can expand them, you can search for them, and this allows you to view component state, computed values, and their methods. So now I'm going to go into a demo of the Vue DevTools. So let me, you guys can't see, but there's this like annoying bar right in my way on my screen for the meeting. All right. So this is a Vue Hacker News clone that the official Vue team has this as an example. So I'm going to have this up here, have my DevTools here, and yeah, so see you here, this is the Vuex tab, so I have access to my store here. It will show me everything available here. This is a reference to the current route we're on. So this is just viewing my store. I have getters down here.
Can you increase the font size in there, please?
I'll try. Okay, that does work in the DevTools. So I'm going to go to the routing tab here. So I only viewed one route so far, so this just has /job. So it looks like I was on route job, I came from job. Let's add another route in here, navigate to a new page. Okay. Sorry, is that big enough? All right. So I just clicked on the top link here. So you can see I was on route/job and I went to route/top. If there were params here, it would tell you there wasn't a page attached, so it didn't add that one in there. And then the other part of the routing tab, which I said it will show you a map of all your routes. So these are all the routes that are possibly available in the application. It looks like we have index here, we have /user, /item, /job, and so on. So I want to take a look at the Components tab. So this is that kind of nested tree structure of your application. We can expand some of these. If you have this side by side, it will highlight the component in the page, which I don't have room to show. But yeah, and then we can manually search this. So if I compress this and search for item list, it'll just show up. And then clicking on any component here will give you the details of that component over here in this part. So the components have some props, which is telling it what type of item list it is. We have data, which shows the items that are displayed. You see we have 20 items displaying here. And then we have our computed properties, which are just memoized properties of the component that are cached for future fetching, and except if they're if the dependencies that the computed values depend on changed, then the computed value evaluates itself. All right, so the Vuex tab. So I didn't show this, the mutations we have here. This is the time travel debugging. So if we want to go to a different state of the application, you can just click here, and they have this bug in the implementation of the Hacker News, but the page is still there. It all loads. It's harmless. But yeah, we can see our app tried to go back to the other route here. Okay. And then the last thing I wanted to show was the Performance tab here. So if we start recording, and go in the application. I'm just going to click around so we have some data to show. All right. So let me turn this off. So this will show the performance of the application. This view right now is showing the FPS of the app. It seems to be running at about 60 the whole time. You see when I clicked on some of the links, these R here represents a route change, so that means I click to a different route in the application. And the M stands for store mutation. So you can see when I clicked at each of these routes, I had a little dip in performance. And this can be used to locate problematic components in your application. If you run anything like Cypress integration testing, you can have it click through all your components and record something like this. And you can show, like if you're loading a certain component and you see your FPS dip like all the way down to like 10 or something, then you know you have a problem you should look into and find a way to optimize that. And this shows the route change that did happen here. Again, I have the details of from and to. And then this component render tab of the performance part tells you how long each component is taking to render. So again, this can help you track down problematic components that are eating up a lot of CPU time and taking forever to load. And it's usually transitions. I'm surprised these are taking not taking as long, but you see this one took. No, that's not even that long. But yeah, so this is a simple application, so there's not really examples of a huge a wait time, but you could see that here, and you can see that at least the relationship here. These ones are non-existent, and these ones are like huge. So, all right, that's all I had for that. Let's go back to the slides. All right, so that's all I had. One thing I wanted to mention is ViewConf Toronto is this coming Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So if you're interested in a View, I would follow some of the core team on Twitter. They usually tweet out when they're at the conferences and everything, and you can get a lot of cool information there and just follow that from home. Are there any questions?
Are there lifecycle hooks within components for React?
Yeah, Vue has lifecycle hooks. They have a whole page detailing them, but pretty much you have like created, mounted, and then like before destroy and after destroy, I think. Mounted is the most common one. That means like when your HTML is actually in the DOM and ready to go. I think that would be like component did mount in React, I think. So you have access to full lifecycle hooks.
So in the CLI UI, is that you're creating a custom dashboard for yourself? Is there a way to do that and share it across the team?
Not yet, at least. Which I'm sure if someone added that as a feature request, they would like take it up. That's the cool thing about this is I haven't seen ideas like turned down really. But yeah, that would be a really useful feature to have the whole team have a unified dashboard. I like that.
I saw you had end-to-end testing, other testing you mentioned at the beginning. I assume that was more of a scaffolding than like a CI dashboard. Is that a feature that might be coming down the line?
Can you be more specific?
I was wondering if there's a way for to use the Vue dashboard system for, say, replacing Jenkins.
Oh, no. Kinda. You probably could.
And you can write your own custom component, so that's certainly doable.
Yeah, it's doable. So if I were to go here, I don't have test on this one, but you can run the test. If I had a test task here, it would run the task for me and just give you the same output as if you ran it in terminal. It'll tell you like these tests pass. So you could program something on top of that, but I still use CI tools. We use Circle CI. So anything else?
First off, thank you for this awesome presentation.
No problem.
I'm currently using Vue at work. It's kind of new, so this is like really helpful. Do you think we could use Vue UI if you already have a project that's already built and like set up without it?
Yeah. So good question. I didn't mention that. Do you know, was the project created using CLI 2 or 3? Do you know?
2.
Okay. So if it was created on CLI 2, you can't directly just import it in. Any project on CLI 3 will be able to be imported in. At the create a project screen, you would just go to import project, and it'll let you import any of them with the Vue logo, which means they're CLI 3. But I recently went on, depending on how big the project is, I recently did this at work. We converted a Vue CLI 2 project to CLI 3. And it took a couple days, probably like 2 days of just going at it. But it was worth it because you have access to the Vue CLI plugins and all the rest of the ecosystem that they improved. So that's something to look into.
Is there any talk about in the Vue UI to have like documentation in there, like that other section on the left, instead of having to go like to the repo and look at the README, just like have all the documentation for the project?
So that would probably be something you could write a widget for, honestly. Like that's.
There'll be a widget in the dashboard rather than like a section on the left. There would be like another, configuration task documentation.
You can do that too. Yeah. So like when I wrote my widget, this little Hello World thing, I dove into the CLI API, and yeah, you can hook right into the sidebar and provide like pages. So yeah, you could write that as a custom page and then just render a Vue component with your documentation. No one has that right now that I've seen, but like I said, this came out this week, so I think that would be a really cool idea.
Yeah, I'm curious. I love the integration with different plugins like ESLint. But one of the problems that I normally see with ESLint migrations is that they love to break the config files. I wonder how Vue manages to curate that. Does it have a, can you install any version of ESLint, for example, or are you stuck with whatever Vue CLI provides you with? Like if you look at the plugin section, I think. Or I can't remember the tab that we had on.
The configuration tab,
yeah.
right here.
Yeah, yeah.
So
we had a couple of knobs there. And
yeah. So so this is only here from the. So I have the ESLint plugin installed, and then I have ESLint installed. So the ESLint plugin, when I installed that, part of its install hook is going to grab ESLint, the package, and install that for me and do whatever setup. So yeah, I don't have to use this, and there is still an ESLint RC file in my project. So yeah, you could just ignore the plugin and upgrade your ESLint NPM package and change your file manually, and yeah, it wouldn't matter.
reflecting the rules then, for example. I think it was a rules, I can't remember. Yeah, there you go.
All this rules file is doing actually is reading your ESLint file. So all the rules that you see prefixed with Vue are just, I'm extending the Vue rules or whatever. And then it knows to grab all those, and then let's see if are there any without. Yeah, so these are all the Vue specific ones because I didn't choose really anything, but it will allow you to change them right from there, and it just looks at the file, kind of like similar to the dependency section. All this is doing is reading your package.json file. It's not doing anything magical. It's reading that file and displaying them. Mm-hmm. Anything else? All right.
You gotta ask one question. Works the same as before. Raise your hand, and the first person I call on who gets it right or mostly right will get a t-shirt.
Round down?
We'll see how it goes. Play by ear. You have a question you can think of?
What is an example of something that plugins can do for you that just installing an NPM package cannot?
Change your Webpack config on the fly.
Yep. All right, there you go. So the answer, in case people didn't hear it, was change your Webpack config on the fly. Come give me your email, or just come see me afterwards, and I'll give you a shirt if we have the right size. Cool, so I said at the beginning we were going to go to Circ Bar. Turns out they're closed for the holiday today. So we'll go to our old standby of MASH. It's 3 blocks away. Let me know if you don't know how to get there. We can all go as a group. Otherwise, thanks for everyone for coming, and we'll see you in a month.